Okay, we are reading chapter 9 today. Well, you would think those kids had never had a rehearsal. First thing, all dozen doozies cartwheeled off the edge of the stage. Well, except for one girl who forgot to move at all. Maria and Morris Boris Norris from my class went on next, and they cartwheeled right off the stage, too. Nobody had to go to the emergency room, though, and the audience thought the whole thing was supposed to happen that way, so it was okay. The next act was the O'Malley twins. Lily had convinced Willie not to do the thing with his lunch. Okay, and here's that picture there, her trying to corral everybody off stage there as the assistant director now, and to play a duet on the piano with her instead. But when Lily got up to the mic to announce the act, she got so nervous she threw up. I looked at Willie sitting on the piano bench. Willie does everything Lily does, and sure enough, he was getting ready. "Not on the piano!" I yelled, just in time. I ran over, closed the curtains quick so the whole audience wouldn't get started too. When the janitor came running out to clean everything up, I had a good idea. "Send Sydney out now in front of the curtains," I told Mrs. Rice. "Why?" she asked. "There's no microphone out there." "That's okay. Sydney's really loud, and she's going to recite a poem, so there's no cartwheeling, just standing still. Besides, she's got really skinny feet, so she can fit out there if she stands sideways." So, Sydney went on stage and stood sideways and yelled her poem. By the time she was done, the stage was all mopped clean. Next came the hula hoopers, and they completely forgot what I'd told them about stopping. The music ended, they just kept on going. Finally, I had to close the curtains to pull them off the stage so the jump ropers could go on. The jump ropers must have figured that if the hula hoopers didn't have to stop at the end of their music, neither did they. So I had to close the curtains on them too. And then came Margaret. She did fine at the walking on stage on time thing, which not everybody did. But just as she got to the microphone, Alan took a picture of her from the audience, which was a bad mistake. Whenever anyone takes a picture of Margaret that she isn't expecting, she freezes. She said it's the horror of not knowing if she looks perfect or not, which I don't understand because Margaret always looks perfect. No matter, there she was, frozen on the stage with her mouth hanging open. For one tiny second, a little part of me thought, "Good, no showing off for you tonight." But then my empathetic part took over. And there she is, standing there with her mouth open, frozen. I ran over to where Margaret could see me, and I waved until I got her eyes to unfreeze. I pointed to my hair, and I pretended to brush it. Margaret nodded like a robot. She turned to the audience. "First, always brush your hair, even if it's cut off like mine." She looked back at me. I pretended to do up some buttons, and then I pointed to my right. "Always make sure you're buttoned up right," Margaret told the audience. And then I lifted my foot and crossed my fingers over my sneakers. "Never wear green sneakers," Margaret said. "Green sneakers are the worst." And then she shook herself as if she had been asleep, and she went up closer to the mic. "Wait a minute," she said. "I was just kidding about that one. You can wear any color sneakers you want, and green is the most fashionable of all." She zoomed me a smile so huge all her teeth bracelets sparkled like diamonds in the spotlight. I zoomed her one back, except with no teeth bracelets because I don't have them yet. And after that, Margaret was okay. I went back, climbed up onto the director's chair, and Principal Rice gave me a huge smile too. She leaned over and said, "I have the answer for you now, Clementine. And why you can't have a substitute. It's because there is no substitute for you. You are one of a kind." And that's when I realized I didn't have the worried feeling anymore. Instead, I had the proud feeling, like the sun was rising inside my chest. The proud sun-rising feeling stayed with me all through the rest of the show. And no matter what went wrong, which was plenty, Mrs. Rice and I just fixed it. Finally, we got to the last act, which was Joe and Buddy. Joe flew one note into his harmonica, and Buddy started howling. The audience went wild for them and kept calling for more, which was good because Buddy kept howling as if he'd been waiting for this all his life. I felt a little jealous thinking about how great Spinach would have been up there with that fancy leash and how much the audience would have loved my act too, especially my parents. Now that last act was over, I guessed they were out there in the audience going, "Hey, wait a minute, where was our daughter?" Mrs. Rice and I closed the curtains and herded all the kids back onto the stage the way we had practiced. And then she opened the curtains again, and everybody took their bows, and only a few kids cracked their heads together. Mrs. Rice and I stepped back into the wings and climbed onto our chairs to watch. The audience kept smiling and clapping. And there is the picture of that. And kids kept smiling and bowing, and I was mostly happy, even though a little part of me was sad. Someday, I'd like to know what it feels like to have people clapping for me, too. "We did it," I said to Principal Rice. "It's over, and we did it." "Yes, indeed we did," said Principal Rice, "but it's not quite over. I have one more thing to do." Then she got off her chair and went on stage to join the crowd of kids. I heard her take the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming to Talent Palooza, Night of the Stars. And now I would like to introduce the person who made it all possible, our very talented director. Without her, we would have had no show here tonight." So Margaret's teacher had come back. It was good news babies could be born so fast in case I ever decided to have one, which I will not. Mrs. Rice came over, put her hand on the side curtain. I jumped off the director's chair to make room for Margaret's teacher, even though I still didn't see her. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mrs. Rice said, "please give a big round of applause for," and she pulled open the curtain, "Clementine!" I was so surprised I just stood there staring. All the 3rd and 4th graders were staring back at me with thank you eyes and big smiles. And then they started clapping, regular at first, but then even harder and harder. Pretty soon they were clapping so hard, I was afraid some of the skinnier kids would break their wrists. And then the audience started clapping like crazy. And it seemed they were never going to stop. The sound grew so loud, it practically peeled the ears right off my head. But I didn't care, because now I did know what it felt like to have people clapping for me, and it was G-O-O-D, good. And there she is. And that's the end of chapter 9. Tomorrow we will read the last chapter of this book. See y'all.